And we're live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Bigfoot Odyssey. This is supposed to be drawing Bigfoot, but Larry had to cancel. So here we are. We're going to read some stories for you guys, and I might sing a Christmas song just because Linda asked me to sing a Christmas song. So I might do it. Maybe if we have time.
Yeah. Get the votes in.
We'll put you guys through that. Yeah, I think we were going to ask someone to come on, and I think Tex might join us a little bit later, but it's kind of it's a Christmas show. We had it planned, so we missed Sunday, right? Had couldn't get anybody booked, so, and I was driving home, so we said we'll do Tuesday, and then tomorrow. What's planned for tomorrow?
You got D.A. Roberts coming back on, haven't you?
Yes, D.A. Roberts and Neoma. Yes, they have a pretty good show, a pretty good live show that they do over there. It's actually one of the few where there's a program and not just sitting down and going live and interacting with the chat, which there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what people want to do, fine. But I just kind of enjoy that. It's kind of like Paranormal Portal. Brent, he's always ready. So that's kind of how I see what DA and them do there. But how's things going with you?
Going good,
Yeah.
Getting ready to wind down for Christmas because it's been a long year. Well, it's been a quick year, but it's been a hard year. So.
Do you see Batmom? We've been having some issues, and I don't know why it's doing this, but I've been trying to rectify it. There are a few people. I got email from probably around 5 people that said, I'm blocked. Why am I blocked? And I'm like, well, we went and looked. These people are not blocked. So the best way I've learned to fix it is to go and actually block them and then unblock them. And it seems to work. So I think Batmom was, I think Donald Fuller was blocked. These are not people that we haven't blocked anyone. The only people I block are the ones that are just nasty for no good reason. I call them basement dwellers. The basement dwellers with Cheeto dust on their keyboard and Mountain Dew Code Red stains on their shirt. Those guys. They don't get to they don't get to comment. They can comment. Damien K, you're not blocked. Funny guy.
Also, Gary Spike Sr.
Gary Spike. Who do we get Christmas cards from? Linwood Workman. Who else? Miss Katie G. I'm telling her story later on. I went through and picked out a few of the better ones. So
I got these today off Katie G.
Wow.
This one.
What is that? Oh, nice.
But what I also got with it was this little UV.
A bloodlight.
Torch flashlight because they do light up a different color in the dark, total dark. So yeah, I got the whole kit. So thank you, Katie G.
I know you guys call flashlights torches.
You don't light them with a match at the end and walk around.
That's what we refer to as a torch.
No, they're called torch. Flashlight torch, It's just the way,
I know you guys are weird.
I've got a horse, yeah.
I feel naked. I'm going to hospital. That's like you're missing.
You just sound just like me. That's so uncanny.
Perfect, wasn't it? All right, we got a few in here. I kind of pre-read some of these earlier, just when I thought I had time, and I remember taking down some of these from people that I talked to on the phone. But most of these are just what people had sent in to me. So we're going to get started with those here shortly. Just to let everybody know, Linda and I are going tomorrow to meet with the mother. We have everything that Linda bought from the list, plus $1,600 cash that we're going to be giving, $1,620 or something like that. But the total that we got was $3,640. And you all came together with Bigfoot Odyssey and did that for this family. So I'm going to see if I can't get a video of her saying a little something for you guys, and we'll play that tomorrow night. So awesome. Congratulations, everyone. We did it once again. All right, let me clear my sinuses. Okay, this is Alberta, Canada. I really, really liked this story. It says, I've always been a tomboy, and as a kid, I spent my days outside playing. Usually, you'd find me either climbing trees, building tree forts out of sticks, catching frogs and salamanders, or my favorite, rolling one of us siblings down a hill inside an old tractor tire. Been there and done that. Broken bones from it. You know, normal kid stuff. If I had to stay inside for whatever reason, I'd watch Discovery Channel or Animal Planet and listen like it was the gospel. I've always loved and been fascinated by animals and nature. Sometimes we would play at our neighbors, the Andersons, who lived about a quarter mile away down the West Road. They had 2 girls, just a little older than I was. Their yard was surrounded by trees, but they had a good-sized clearing for their house. Looking back, I'd say it was probably close to a 300 by 300 foot clearing with their house in the middle. Their driveway was long and twisted through the trees. Their yard was big and bare, except for a trampoline halfway between the house and trees and some old quads, trailers, trucks, and other things beside the barn. They had a couple riding horses and 1 miniature, and would let us kids help brush and feed them. And once we even got to ride them. Sinus is draining. I remember one time in particular, my mom, dad, little sister, big brother, and I all went to visit the Andersons. We had been there for the day, and I remember eating supper with them. Afterwards, the adults played country music and drank on the deck while us kids played. This was the night I had my experience. We were outside, and just before the sun went down, Mr. Anderson called in the horses and put them in the barn for the night. It was beautiful that summer night. Not even a breath of wind, just calm, quiet, and peaceful, save for the noise the adults were making and random animals. The kind of night that makes you happy just sitting outside. I was jumping on their trampoline with the other kids, but as night set in, clouds rolled in and darkness came. The other kids went inside to watch TV while I stayed outside playing on the trampoline. Hide and go seek in the dark was my favorite game as a kid, so I wasn't afraid of the dark. Plus, the adults were close. I was happily jumping away, laughing and doing flips when I heard my mom yell we had to go soon. I yelled back, okay. But then I noticed my friendly animal night noises stopped. I couldn't hear them anymore, which, for only a second, I thought was weird, but then paid no more attention to it. We had to go soon, and I was determined to get as much playtime in as I could. There was the slightest little breeze, and I remember I thought I was starting to smell the slough. I just remember a gross smell that was almost a cross between the slough and a dead beaver or muskrat. It almost stuck to your nostrils. Shortly after noticing the noises stopped and the smell came, I got an eerie feeling out of nowhere. I stopped jumping and scanned their yard. The adults were still drinking and laughing, and I didn't see anything. I went back to jumping, and I remember this time kept watching the trees by the barn. I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling, and it was starting to bother me. Just before the tree line on the southern side of the property, where the barn and behind that the slough were located, there is a patch of thick, prickly bushes, the kind that purple-red stems and big thorns. I knew I couldn't get through that area. I had tried before this night, and the thorn bush was up to my tiny chest. With it being cloudy, it was hard to make out anything, but I had been outside long enough, and my eyes adjusted to the dark enough that I could sort of see. I slowed my jumping and just stared at that direction. I don't know why. I didn't hear any noises, but I felt like something was there. Then all at once, like a brick smacking me in the face, my eyes focused on a mass, a huge, dark black mass. It was so dark, it was like a deep, engulfing black against the already dark trees. I remember being absolutely terrified, and I felt my hair raise up on my head and arms. I was so afraid. I couldn't cry or scream or do anything. I was frozen in place. I didn't know what I was looking at or if it was even alive. Something in my mind told me to lay down slowly, so I did. Sorry. As slow as I could, I laid down on the trampoline and tried to make myself smaller. The entire time, thoughts running through my head. What is that? Is it alive? Why didn't I notice it sooner? Lay down slower. Don't make a sound. It's hard to describe exactly, but it's almost as if the time slowed down. All I could hear was my own heart pounding. I lay there for a little bit watching this mass, trying to make it out as much as I could. My mind going a mile a minute. What could it be? Why is it just standing there? Honestly, I remember I didn't want to act like I was a scaredy cat. I was a little proud of being a tomboy. I didn't want to tell the adults and them think I was afraid of nothing and send me inside. The clouds were only just beginning to thin and clear, so I could see a little better than previously. So I started trying to figure out what I was looking at. My eyes darted all over this, and as I tried to figure out what parts were, if anything, it was a little away from the side of the barn, but I could compare that it was almost as tall as the lower part of the roof, which was maybe 10 feet off the ground. So it was big. I noticed it was much taller than the prickly bushes that were up to my chest. It was a big, broad, rectangular-ish shape that only very slightly tapered near the middle of about where I suppose a waist would be, making the wider parts shoulders. The top of this rectangle had a rounded off point at the middle of it, like a bump or hump. A hump, I thought, and I started to calm down for a moment. I felt a tiny amount of relief as I reminded myself moose are huge animals and have big humped shoulders, and maybe its antlers were hidden in the trees. Moose can still be dangerous, but at least I thought I knew what it was. I was moving to get back up when suddenly, just at the exact same time, I saw two orangish orbs reflecting in the porch light, like eyes, but these eyes would have been in the moose's hump and facing forward. I thought, that's not right. And just then, something small came flying in out of the trees. I heard a little thud as whatever it was hit the ground in front of me. I didn't see what landed, but I looked back at this thing and saw it pacing. It was moving on two legs. This is long. It's longer than I remember. I felt nauseous instantly. I vividly remember all those feelings I felt at that moment. It was a mix of immense fear, nausea, and confusion. This thing I was looking at was walking like us on two legs and paced back and forth, and just kept doing that. There was a break in the clouds for a moment, and the moonlight poured over the yard for a few seconds. That's when I got my best look at this thing. It was a monster. As it walked, I noticed it had long hair covering its whole body. Sorry. I remember when it moved its arms, I could see the strands of clumps of hair hanging down. Looking back, I guess this thing was about 8 feet tall, going by the barn roof. When it bent its knees to walk, its knees bent above the prickly bush. But what made it worse was I could hear it moving. I couldn't hear the crunches of twigs breaking, leaves rustling, nothing. It was so stealthy, a part of me wanted to take the opportunity to look at its face, but I was too afraid to look and make eye contact. It's my phone that makes that noise. Then another something came flying out of the trees, but this time it landed next to the trampoline within the light of the porch. I could see it was a pine cone. Any thoughts I had stopped. Everything stopped, and all I knew was whatever this was right there at the trees, only 100 feet away from me. It was alive. It was massive. It wasn't a moose or bear or anything I knew of, and it threw something toward me twice. That realization, that thought intensified the immense fear, and I began to panic. The pacing only lasted about 30 seconds, but it seemed to me as if it lasted an eternity. When it stood still again, I quickly jumped off that trampoline and ran crying to the adults on the well-lit deck as fast as I could. I stomped up the steps and ran to my mom, who caught me in her lap and asked what was wrong. I told her the monster in the trees was going to get me. The adults laughed and said, "Maybe she isn't tough. I told you she would have to put her we should have put her inside with the others." Mom brought me inside, listened while I told her what I saw, washed my face, and sat me with the other kids who had fallen asleep watching TV. She assured me everything was okay and that sometimes dark shadows can look like they dance and move in the trees. She said she knew I was afraid, so she was going to get my dad and wake my siblings and we'd go. As we drove out their driveway and I kept watching that southern side of the barn, the clouds had cleared by now. The moon was big and bright. The yard was well lit, but this thing was gone. I wanted to show my parents, but Dad hushed me and kept driving. I don't remember the drive after that or the rest of the night. My mom remembered it and that year very well. She told me that soon after the incident, all us kids had a change in our behavior. My oldest brother didn't like the cut through in the trees to walk to school anymore. He felt like he was being watched, so he walked down the highway instead or caught a ride with us. My sister and I both developed fears we didn't have previously. Mom had her own questionable experiences and she couldn't talk to Dad or us or anyone about it at that time. A couple more paragraphs, y'all. Okay. Mom had heard about a month before my incident, just before school let out for the summer, that Mr. Strawson, who lived about a 40-minute drive away, had one of his beloved dogs and several pigs go missing. No blood, no tire tracks from a vehicle, nothing. It was as if they just disappeared. He never did find them or find out what was happening, according to Mom. About a week after my incident, the miniature horse at the Andersons was found dead in the field. Mom said she helped Miss Anderson get rid of the carcass, and that poor thing was ripped apart, and its head was turned all the way around the wrong way. She stopped letting us play outside at night after that, and she kept the blinds closed once the sun went down, which is something Mom never did in the summer. She always used to leave the screen door open and let the fresh air in at night. I don't remember this part, but she told me one night, about 3 weeks or so after what happened to me on the trampoline, I ran into her room crying that the black monster was going to get me again and wouldn't leave me alone. I would not go back to my room, and I had apparently begged my mom to save my sister, who shared a room with me. She believes that about the time when my weird fear of windows at night started, my little 1-year-old sister developed such a strong fear of the dark, and being alone around this time had to sleep with the light on, curtains closed, and radio playing. Sorry. Oh, arm. Mom also told me once, months later in November before it snowed, she was driving home after dropping us off at school. She came around the bend in the road and swears she saw something big standing upright, quickly ducked down into the tall, dead grass of the ditch. She made out a cone-shaped head and weirdly long arms and hands before it disappeared in the grass. She sped past that bend and down the road as quick as she could. She told my dad when she got home, and he said it was probably just a bear foraging for before winter and not to scare us kids. No one in my family heard anything like howls or whoops or screams. However, a couple of times my older brother came inside and said something like someone's knocking on trees outside in the pasture behind our shed. Our dad would write it off as another farmer or something. There was a lot of strange activity in our area that year. Weird knocks, trees that looked like they had snapped in half, animals missing, stuff like that. She doesn't know for 100% certainty if it was Bigfoot or what, but she said, I went from being the type of kid you couldn't drag inside the house. My goodness. I don't know what's happened here. I suddenly lost everything. Sorry.
That's okay.
I went from being the type of kid you couldn't drag inside the house, even at night, to being inside before the sun went down, and my entire demeanor had changed. She would she would see things out of the corner of her eye that made her question her own judgment. But my sighting, along with her own and everything that was going on, confirmed for her that something was out there that summer and fall. My dad believes in Bigfoot, but thinks we're crazy for thinking we might have actually had experience with one, especially since he never did on that farm. He thinks a bear or mountain lion must have come through that year and never has believed my story. Well, I believe it.
Oh, yeah. That's
Al-
like marked their life, hasn't it? From that point at such a young
Yeah,
age.
Alberta, Canada. I mean, I thought it was well written. You know, she gave a lot of detail, and you know, if you if you're telling a story, that's obviously what you want to do. You want to give as much context as you can. And this one was that's why I liked it so much, is because you could kind of feel what she was going through in those moments.
Mm. It's like a roller coaster, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Of realizing something was there, and then, oh, it's okay, it's just a moose, probably, and then the eyes, and then the shape. So, yeah, great.
Well,
There's so much detail as well.
yeah. But you know, I hear this a lot, and it's the ones that are 20, 30 years old where something happened for a couple of weeks one summer, and then they never had anything else happen again. So it kind of makes you wonder about this whole migration loop, or if maybe they are around and you just don't notice it, and you know, something, who knows, these creatures might just get a wild hair and go nuts at certain times and just be cantankerous, and who knows.
Just anything is possible.
It is all possible. We've got next week, I think next Wednesday, a couple coming on that they've got an ongoing problem. They live in Florida, and this woman, lady, saw this thing face to face looking at her through the window. And that was her introduction to it. They didn't have a clue until then. And now you gotta see. He sent me pictures of things that were torn up and broken around the house, and we're gonna get them on next week, though.
They definitely seem to be attracted to the ladies, don't they? There seems to be something
Yeah,
where they're seeing women, and it's, really capturing their attention,
and kids.
and kids. And men, I mean, are they aggressive with men or more scary with men? And do females have less of a scary encounter? I don't know.
Probably maybe less threatening.
Less
I don't
threatening,
know.
possibly.
You'd have to think these creatures watch us enough to kind of know our tendencies and our notions, and you know, men tend to be a little bit more aggressive. I think hunters are the ones that have the more aggressive encounters, and I think that's just because of guns.
Uh-huh.
You know, these creatures seem to know what guns are, and that at least that they're bad. That things tend to die when we use them. If
Merry Christmas, Wes. Thank you.
Hey Wes, Merry Christmas. I think I saw there was quite a few in here. Dark Waters was in here, I think.
Yeah.
Brown Dwarf, good to see you. A lot of people I haven't seen in a while. All right.
So yeah, that was a long one, but a good
That
one.
was a long one. That was the longest one.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even reading slow. Wow, 24 minutes in already. Oh, good. We won't have time for a Christmas song. So, all
I
right.
think we should. Well, I need to put
Sorry.
the poll up, don't I? See if what people think.
I'll sing you one. I'll sing you one later. Linda's sitting there on the couch, listening to the show. This is Montana, Glacier County, and I think I told this a long time ago. Maybe you guys remember, but like I said, one of my more favorite ones, at least favorite ones to read. It's not nearly as long as the first one. And it says, I can hardly remember the date, but I do remember the events leading up to the sighting. It was a very warm fall day when my cousins and myself decided decided to some. Oh, there should be the word "do" should be in there. To do some hunting. I'll go ahead and do that. When my cousins and I decided to do some hunting on horseback, the area that we hunted was the foothills of the Rockies and the Blackfeet Reservation in Big Sky Country. We had decided halfway into the trip to just take a ride, wait for Lady Luck to bring us something during the ride. My goodness, I hate this sinus. All day was pretty good as far as the ride went, but I know that everybody still had the idea of getting a deer on their mind. We had decided to ride home through a brushy trail, hoping to run into some game before we got there. Most of the day was gone, and the evening sun was warming our backs as we made our way home. As we approached the trailhead, my cousin's horse was reluctant and fought the bridle bit for a while. We thought it was just because of it being green broke. once again, I'm sorry. Once inside the brush a good ways in, our horses started stepping very softly and snorted once in a while as if something didn't agree with their sense of smell. Is that my internet going out?
No, you sound good.
Okay. I could see the opening of the trail, and it would also be the end of the trail. One of my cousins was just about to say something when our horses began jumping in different directions like they were scared of something. The first thing on all our minds was a bear. We began looking in different directions, trying to find the location of the bear. I do remember who was the first to sight what it was we saw. I just heard him swear and ask the rest of us to look. We looked in the direction he was pointing and saw this very. All right. Damien, quit sending me messages while I'm reading. I'm using my phone, guys. All right. I just heard him swear and asked the rest of us to look. We looked in the direction he was pointing and saw this very tall thing running on two legs beside us and then turned in front of us. The thing crossed the trail in front of us about 40 feet and stopped at the edge of the brush. It just stared at us as if the same amount of amazement as we were, and then disappeared into the trees just as fast. The best way I can describe it as probably the hairiest man I've ever seen and well past 6 feet tall. It was hard to determine the size, but the branches we found broken the next day were from 6 feet to about 8 feet in some places. Some footprints were found in places where the ground was soft along the trail we followed toward the mountains. This was the only sighting we had since then, and this was when I was 14 years old. I am now 30, and I'm certain I'm the first one to tell anyone what we saw that day. A lot shorter.
They know what they've seen, haven't they?
You know, I didn't fix this one. I usually, those run-on sentences, they get me when there's a lot of ands and.
Oh, well, you can't,
Yeah, look, not everybody's a writer. I'm definitely not one. I have to rewrite things to suit my own style, which probably if anybody else read it, they'd be like, huh?
A lot of people write like the talking, don't they?
Yeah.
As opposed to proper grammar, which, I mean, not everyone, like I say, not everyone does that. Even I have to check what I'm writing, especially with you, because I know you're on it when I do something wrong. Like, boom.
Yeah, well, you're on it when I do something wrong too, so I want to hear that.
All right, okay.
But I don't leave prepositions at the end of sentences or anything like that,
Okay.
Can't stand it.
No, fair enough.
Where are you coming from?
Right, did a little poll in the chat, and 84% have said yes. But I thought, instead of putting any pressure on you, maybe, I don't know if we're doing Christmas Eve, but maybe a little piano singing something for you to prepare for.
Okay. I'll do that
tonight, because I know your sinuses and everything.
Yeah, we'll do that. I'll play some Christmas songs and actually sing them.
There you go, people.
When is this again?
Holy Night. Someone's asking for Holy Night. Friday night, Christmas Eve.
Do we have a show then?
Well, not necessarily. We could do. I didn't think you wanted. I didn't think you were going to be around.
No, we're not going to do a show Christmas Eve.
Okay, so
I'm not. You guys can, but I'm not going to be. I'm going to
okay.
be with the family.
Thursday then.
Thursday.
Yeah,
I will play. I will play Thursday and sing.
We've got Brent Thomas on Paranormal Portal, so
nice.
We can.
So y'all prepare for that.
Yeah, we'll prepare.
Not taking requests.
Okay.
But I'll do a couple. So I got to set all the piano up and everything, but we'll get it done. All right.
Question here from Brown Dwarf. Kerry, do you practice singing in the shower?
I don't practice singing at all, Brown Dwarf. I'm not much of a singer. Linda makes me sing sometimes. It's I'm not a pro at it. I'll say that. I'm a much better pianist, and I'm not very good at that either. For as long as I've been playing, I should be a lot better than I am a singer. So you guys are going to get to have a nice laughing treat in a couple of days. This is Ohio, Summit County, and it seems like I had 10 stories from Summit County, Ohio. So it says, my incident occurred on the 4th of July, 1995 in the CVNRA in Boston, Ohio. I was in the Army and home on leave at the time. 3 of us, myself, a cousin, and a friend I had just left the Independence Day fireworks and decided to go for a night hike on the railroad tracks, which run parallel to Riverview Road near Brandywine Ski Resort. Yeah, we all know where that is. This was a hike we have made several times before in varying locations along the same road without incident. On this particular hike, we parked in a public lot and headed north on the Cuyahoga Valley Line tracks. I would say the time was around 11:30 p.m. and the sky was clear with a very bright moon. We hiked about a quarter mile when all of a sudden we heard a distant, high-pitched scream from the west across Riverview Road. The scream sounded similar to that of a coyote or a peacock, only it was raspier and lasted 5 seconds. We shrugged it off as some sort of animal and continued on. As we hiked the tracks, we got to a clearing that was a swamp to the west of us. To the west of it, between the tracks and the road, had tall weeds, brush, and trees were to the east. As we passed through this clearing, we could see beavers swimming in the swamp and heard typical summer insects and frogs. This thing. Every time I get it close to my mic, it does static. We entered a heavily wooded area where some railroad cars and equipment were parked. We nosed around for a few minutes and decided to head back. We were talking amongst ourselves as we entered the clearing again when a second, very powerful, angry roar came from the middle of the swamp. Once again, it was higher in pitch than that one would normally believe a roar to sound like. This time, it lasted much longer, about 10 seconds, and was very close, about 50 feet. That is close. The 3 of us froze dead in our tracks, and I had just uttered, "What in the world was that?" when a very large creature came charging through the swamp right at us. All we could see was a silhouette, but it was definitely upright on 2 legs and swinging its arms. We watched as it ran through the water. This thing was actually making waves and moving extremely quick for being waist deep in muddy water and cattails. The 3 of us sprinted back toward the car, occasionally looking back to see if it was following us. We could see the silhouette at the edge of the swamp, but it never left that spot, nor did it climb up to the tracks. This happened over 11 years ago, and I remember it as though it were yesterday. I would also bet that this was no prank, given the sheer size and the power it displayed as it muscled through the water, not to mention the scream. I still live in the area, Richfield, and pass through this spot on a regular basis. Although I've never seen or heard anything like this since, it still gives me goosebumps when I drive through the area. My wife thinks I'm nuts. My wife thinks I'm nuts too, but not for that reason.
You're always going to be looking at you when you're going through. It's always going to be in your mind. You would think.
That does happen to me to this day. I look off in the woods, especially if we're driving slow. Go across a bridge, bottom of a hill, look over into the woods. It's just a thing. I just look, even if I'm driving. So I got 2 more. How much time we got? 25 minutes. I'm doing Miss Katie G. I'm gonna tell her story last. I thought her story was just great, the way it's written. This one's kind of medium length. This is from Sally. And it says, I just started looking at your website and podcast and just watched the one where you're telling your story. It reminded me of our son's face-to-face encounter that he had in the Kaibab National Forest on the north rim of the Grand Canyon in the late 90s. Our son is still totally traumatized and won't talk about it or go in any woods to this day. He's never hunted since. I'm glad you're talking about these creatures and sharing experiences because people need to be aware of it. Our son said he thought he wasn't going to make it out of there alive. I really know what that feels like. And that will do that to you. I think there's a difference between having a sighting, having an encounter, and having one of these things mad at you. I think it just has a much more profound effect on you, just to know that it's possible that there's something you can do that you are not aware of that can trigger one of these creatures. And that's what bothers me about any of it, and people not knowing is that thing. So here we go. He was an avid hunter / fisherman and all-around sport nut, had a run-in with Bigfoot in the late 90s. I'll tell you what I know about it, how it's adversely affected him, and vouch for his complete honesty. We're from central Wisconsin. My husband's family is completely nuts about hunting, fishing, outdoors, camping, etc. He was raised to be involved with all that stuff. He's also honest, no nonsense, not a drinker or a BS type storyteller. He got a Bachelor of Science, double major in computer science and law enforcement administration. He did an internship and summer work in law enforcement, so he has that background in observation and investigation. He works in computer science and data security. Married, they moved to Phoenix area to be by her family. We wondered about his hunting and fishing because it's central to his life. So at first we heard about him fishing there and his hunting in northern Arizona. He was excited about the huge, never-ending wood area there. Then after a couple of years, he completely stopped hunting, didn't talk about it, and completely focused on fishing. He made a couple of offhand comments every now and then about sticking with fishing because he wasn't the prey, and that he didn't want to hunt there because he didn't want to be the prey. We knew something happened to change him, but he wouldn't talk about it. We also noticed that he started carrying a gun when they camped. Since Arizona allows handguns, we didn't think much of it. I'm so sorry. Sounds strange. Around 2005 or so, we were visiting him and were alone with him in his family room. His wife and daughters were outside or away. He didn't want to scare them by telling them anything about Bigfoot. He went to a website with Bigfoot calls and asked us what kind of animal makes those sounds. Then he and my husband went back and forth trying to eliminate or identify from familiar animal calls. He said he never paid attention to anything about Bigfoot until he went hunting in the Kaibab. Hope I'm saying that right. He was visibly shaken, white as a ghost, and almost shaking just recalling it. He said his experience totally changed his life. He said, "Dad, you always taught me not to be afraid of the woods, to respect it, but we're in charge. So I thought I was king of the jungle. Here I am, an adult, and I'm scared of the woods. I've gone from being a little kid, scared of the woods, to thinking I'm king of the jungle, to now being afraid to go in the woods." He said, "I saw face to face a massive, hairy, monkey man monster. I looked right at something that's not supposed to be real, but it is real. I pressed him. How far away? What did it look like? He said, "Ma, it was like right there to my fence in the backyard." So he was describing maybe a couple hundred feet. So here's what he told us. He and a buddy had gone bow hunting for deer in the fall of that north rim of the Grand Canyon in the Kaibab forest area. They both had their pickups, tents, and ATVs. They were in the remote, higher elevations on a dirt mountain road. They set up their tents and built a fire. Then they both went in the woods for a while. They noticed odd bent over twisted trees, scratches, and log formations. They both started noticing sounds in the woods like something was trailing them and rocks were coming in at them like they were being thrown. They went back to their tents, but the noises and rock throwing continued. My son's buddy said it was too creepy there, and so he packed up his tent and gear and left while there was still daylight in order to get down the trail back off the mountainous terrain. Our son, figuring he's king of the jungle, decided that since he got a lottery deer permit and he had a few days off, he wanted to keep hunting. Yeah, if you get a lottery deer permit, that means someone drew your name to go hunt somewhere. Those are usually really good places to hunt. That's why so many people want to go. So that's what that means, a lottery permit. So he stayed in his tent by himself that night. He said he didn't sleep that well because he kept hearing noises, rocks, and something actually rubbing against his tent, but he came there to hunt. So at the crack of dawn, he gets on his ATV and drives back into the deep woods where he parked the ATV and then started hunting on foot with his bow. Again, he saw the twisted trees, brush structures, and tree scratches. As he walked around during his hunt, he became more and more aware that something was trailing him. He said he went through a mental checklist of what it could be, such as if a bear or a cougar was stalking him, he reasoned he probably wouldn't hear it so plainly. Then he wondered if a wounded animal was stalking him, which could have been why it was making tracking noises. Sorry. He said he finally got mad and decided to figure out what he was dealing with. With the hilly, mountainous, woodsy terrain, there are canyons and gullies. So he decided to drop down and double behind whatever was stalking him. He quietly sneaked down behind some rocks, then began to sneak up on whatever was there. He started noticing an awful, strong, musty, stinky, wet, dirty dog smell. Wow, that's a lot of adjectives. He slowly crept toward whatever was there. When he got through some terrain, he saw a huge, massive monkey man without a tail crouched down looking the other way. He assumed it was looking for where he was. He said he was so petrified he wanted to run and scream. Being petrified and responding by habit to fear, he aimed the bow and arrow at it. The creature then saw him. He said it stood up and let out a chest-rattling growl. So there he was with his small bow and arrow pointed at it, facing it, frozen in fear. He said it had a human-looking face. He said, "I'm looking at this massive monster that doesn't exist. I don't have a permit. My bow and arrow probably wouldn't even nick it. This 9-foot monster could charge me and break me like a stick." He said he was transfixed in terror as they faced each other. Then he said he decided he had to ease away and not scream or run like prey. He backed off with his bow and arrow, then backed up as fast but as smoothly as he could muster. He then tried to watch it without staring at it. He then tried to watch it without staring as he tried to walk back and away toward his ATV. He said the thing shadowed him all the way, making noises, crashing trees, and ducking behind brush. When he got to the ATV, he jumped on and drove back to his camp. By this time, it was approaching dusk, so he felt he couldn't get out of there on the remote road at night, but he also didn't feel safe staying in the tent. So he got in his truck to wait for dawn. He said throughout the night he could hear noises, hear stuff thrown at the truck, and felt that something was brushing against the truck every now and then. However, whenever he noticed anything, he laid on the panic horn. He said he was so scared he didn't think he would survive the night. At the crack of dawn, he got out of the truck just long enough to grab his stuff and throw it into the bed and get himself out of there. He's never gone back. He said he's got no interest in deer hunting in those woods again because it's one thing to go there when you're king of the jungle, but not if you're the prey, where massive monsters can break you like a twig. Yeah, that's the feeling, that you're powerless. When you get a sense of the kind of power that she's describing him talk about, that's exactly the feeling. You just have no interest in ever going back. If you did go back, like me, if I did go back, I would. He's okay. He's in here.
You keep freezing, but your audio's fine. But for some reason, your image keeps freezing. But you're clear now.
It's my internet. Here, let me see if I can.
Yeah, it's terrifying, isn't it? And just to walk away from that is such a shame. Thank you, John's 3, and Merry Christmas to you. Have you frozen, or can you still hear me, Kerry? I think he's frozen. So, yeah, let me just go back and check that poll. A lot of people that, yeah, definitely Kerry will be singing hopefully on Thursday. Well, I don't have a encounter to read. So what did Strangeland suggest before? Oh, you're back. There you go.
Yeah, I don't know what I did. I think I turned my internet off completely on accident. I'm having to use my phone because the internet here stinks.
Oh, well. Hopefully it'll be good for the piano Thursday.
Yeah, I'm gonna get, well, by then my my internet rolls over on my hotspot, so I'll be able to use that.
Yeah, you get a good signal off that, don't you?
Yeah, my phone is usually okay, but it seems like something else is hooked to it. So at any rate, we got one more, and that's Miss Katie G's story, which, you know, to hear her tell it is one thing, but the way she's written it, I just thought it was really, it's well written. There's to me, the right amount of detail, everything you need to know to give you the context. I hate coming home. I live in West Texas when I work, and it is so dry because you're 3,000 feet above sea level. It's the high plains. There's no trees, so any allergies or anything you have, they pretty much don't affect you there, except maybe once a year when something blooms, it might get you. But when I come home, it's so humid. I can't even breathe. You're gonna have to move. That'll never happen either.
One solution.
All right, this is Miss Katie G, who actually helps and works with Bigfoot Odyssey. My encounter happened 38 years ago in the May of 1982. So it's been almost 40 years at this point. 39 and a half. Near a small town in North Carolina named Baden, B-A-D-I-N, Baden. I was 9 years old and hiking with my parents and a few of their friends. Oh, this thing. We had spent the morning hiking around the woods and trails near Baden Lake, and the adults were enjoying themselves. But being the only person in the group under 30, I had gotten very bored with just walking. In the early afternoon, the group decided, oh, I hate this. I'm trying to keep that static away. In the early afternoon, the group decided to look for a place on a hillside that was supposed to be the site of an American Indian settlement. We had finally stopped for a bit to eat and rest before hiking back to the road. After eating my sandwich, I decided to explore a little and also heed the personal call of nature. I told my mother I was going to go find a tall bush, which was code speak for needing nature's facilities, so that she would expect me to be out of sight. It wouldn't have been an issue back then as it would be today to let your child get out of sight for a while. That's true. I used to walk to the store when I was 6, 7 years old. I crossed a couple of ravines, big gullies really, with steep sides to put some distance between myself and the group before angling down the slope. Nothing nothing too far. If it were a straight line, it might have been 150 yards. I could tell by the slope of the land and the way the trees started to thin that I was nearing one of the narrow service tracks where the Alcoa plant ran their utility trucks. The area was controlled by Alcoa, and the consensus was one of trespassing is prohibited, punishable by arrest and fines. But in practice, it was as long as you don't tear anything up and we don't catch you, we aren't going to be looking for you. So, knowing the importance of not getting caught, I went to the edge of the tree line to select my tall bush. I figured I had done fairly well, so I selected a tree to lean against that was at the edge of the woods and also up a steep, cleared slope from the road where I could see anyone coming before they saw me. The slope had only weeds and grass, none taller than knee high, but enough to offer a screen from the road. And my good sturdy tree had my back, was a good as any toilet for a wood savvy kid like I was. When I finished, I stood up, and it's in that moment, everything went wrong. I suddenly felt weak. Then it was as if my knees, my senses, my sight had left me. As I stood there without knowing when or how, I was looking into the face of a creature. Down the slope, across the track, and in the edge of the woods stood a giant hair-covered being, just 50 or so feet away. If it had made a sound or had an odor, my brain did not or could not register it. I was frozen. I couldn't move or make a sound. It felt as if any free will I had over myself was gone. I felt sick, weak, confused, and afraid. I was paralyzed, and if anyone or anything had made a sound or a movement toward me, I couldn't have done a thing about it. I could only stare at the creature. I couldn't even look away. There was an odd, unpleasant feeling in my chest as if a great weight had been set upon me and was pinning me down. My brain seemed to feel too heavy for my skull, and it was as if I were unable to command my body. I could only stare. I couldn't even make a sound as it stared back. It was so unfamiliar, nothing I'd ever seen, human or animal, could describe it. The body was massive, covered in hair that was a dulled black, with a lighter quality over it, almost like the black of charcoal with some ash on it. The hair was longer in some places and varied in thickness, but some spots over the torso and abdomen were clumped together, as if an oily or wet substance was sticking them together. The skin underneath was a dark grayish black, lighter than the hair, but not by much. There was no hair around its eyes, nose, or lips, but a thin, long layer on the cheeks and down the jawline and under the mouth. Its eyes were dark, black, looking and deep set, but close together, and it had a thick, heavy brow, but nothing that resembled eyebrows as humans have. It sloped back into the hair covering its head. Its nose was large, but like a human's, with a pinkish red color showing in its nostrils. The mouth was broad with thin lips, but again almost shapeless, just a crevice across the face. The jaw was long and heavy-looking. Hair obscured most of the jaw and area beside and below the mouth. I could not see a chin. It didn't seem to have a neck. The huge head looked to be stuck on the body between two massive shoulders, with a slight point to it that could have been obscured by hair because this is where the hair seemed thickest. Goodness, almost didn't make it. There seemed to be a mass of something, hair, flesh, or something else that made it look as if it had a lump or hair behind its head tapering down to its shoulders. The creature was wider than two large men and thick of body and limbs. Its arms dropped at its side and were long. but I couldn't say what the hands looked like in great detail. I was transfixed on its face. I don't recall that I looked lower because I have no memory of lower legs or feet, or maybe my view was obscured. I do remember that it was a male, though. It was very tall. I was in no frame of mind then to guess how tall, but in retrospect, I'd say taller than 8 feet and probably 4 more feet wide at the shoulders. The only part it moved was its lips. It never opened its mouth, never blinked, never swayed or ducked. It just stood there as still as I, looking at me while its lips moved slightly, as if it were sucking on something or puckering them slightly. Well, that's scary enough. Then it stepped backwards into the brush and disappeared. No noise, only a slight movement of leaves and dark fading shadow until it was gone. Suddenly, I began to feel my senses return. First, my hearing, which was more of a realizing I was hearing nothing, but my own shallow breathing, then my pounding heart. All at once, I could move and think again. I was making a weird sound deep in my throat, like I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't obey. I was shaking and tears were on my face. I immediately threw up and bologna sandwich, then struggled to run away. I still felt weak and heavy, out of breath and disoriented. Just moving seemed a monumental task. I was clumsy and having difficulty making my way back to the adults. I don't remember that part clearly, other than being absolutely certain this thing was going to get me. I told my mother that a giant, hairy, naked man in the woods had watched me pee, embarrassing her in front of her friends and colleagues who all chuckled. She laughed, then scolded me, saying that I was making up stories because I was bored. I never said another word to her about it. That whole experience changed me in many ways. I'd always enjoyed being outside and in the woods. It was a long time before I could enjoy that again or bear being near a window after dark. I carry the fear from that day still. I had never heard of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. I had no frame of reference for what I had seen except a wolf man, so in my child's mind, that's what it became. That human but not human, animal but not animal thing. I believe for some time after that, this creature spent some of its time as a human man, and all the stories were wrong about the full moon. I experienced anxiety and panic attacks for the first time in my life. I didn't know what was happening to me. I just associated the feeling with that creature, and still being a kid enough to think on kid terms, I would promise myself and it and the Lord that if the creature would come to me, I'd never tell anyone about his secret. I made that sentiment a part of my daily prayers and believed it was all that kept me safe. I finally got a hold of some Time Life books in the library at school, and in them I read about the giant hairy Sasquatch and thought, maybe. But no, that was in California. I was in North Carolina, so not likely. Over the years, I got a little piece back, but still my mantra over never telling was what I believed kept me safe. The entirety of the encounter was no longer than 10 seconds, but it has lasted 38 years. I still succumb to the panic occasionally, usually in nightmares where it returns to finally get me. I still say to that, I promise not to tell. I have suffered a lot from my experience, but that is a whole different rabbit hole. The only people I've ever told in any depth is my husband and children, and even then, not as much as I've shared with you. I don't really talk about it and have only mentioned it a handful of times, and then only if asked directly. I'm telling you now, and it's not without a sense of betrayal to my mantra, but I believe, sir, that you among a few do understand my feelings. I want to say I'm not afraid even now, and I will, without a doubt, have a nightmare, which happens every time I dwell in that memory, but I also need peace. I don't want to harbor its secret anymore. In closing, let me apologize again for being remiss in telling of my account. It wasn't without some difficulty for me to be open and to think of it so much. I do appreciate your willingness to listen. May you continue to be blessed and have a pleasant evening. Sincerely, Miss Katie G. That was nice. And look, almost exactly right on time.
Wow. There you go. That's such a big weight to carry, isn't it? You think you're keeping a secret and keeping it all tucked away and fine, but actually what it plays on, how it plays on your mind. And then there must be some relief when you start to share it with people.
Extremely frustrating to know something is out there that no one's going to believe. And it's strictly the nature of the creature that makes it so difficult. You know, we try to get images and pictures of them because we know they're there, and we'll catch some pretty clear, relatively clear, and it kind of looks like the bushes, maybe a little bit, but that's the whole idea. These creatures are trying to look like the bushes, but you can just tell, you know, especially when it's clear enough, you can see the sticks and the leaves, that this is not sticks and leaves making this this face with the apex head, and you see the body and the shoulder. So we know they're out there. There are plenty of people that know these creatures are out there, and it's extremely frustrating to not be able to give the kind of evidence that's going to convince people. That's why I try so hard. When we go down, we're going back in March. We're going to try really hard again to get something more convincing, because they are there. But we're gonna employ some different tactics and take a lot better tech with us this time, and a lot more people. So there'll be more people spread out through the area to have experiences.
It's a learning curve, everyone. You know, it's fine tuning it, isn't it?
Yes.
It just doesn't happen straight away.
Yes.
It's never been done before, so there's a lot of experimenting, and maybe what you planned to happen doesn't always work out until you're actually there trying it and doing it. So I think, the more you go at it, the better. Obviously, the better it's going to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not without its difficulties, but I feel like anybody that actually has skin in this game, there are plenty of people that come on and talk about, the Monday morning quarterbacks is what I call them. Haven't had an experience, don't really go out in the woods, but we'll come on and break down what happened to you, or break down someone else's experience. And this is all I have to say is, if you've got skin in the game, which those people don't, but if you do, and you want to come forward, put your money where your mouth is. Do everything you can do. Fine, you want to tell people stories and talk about these things, but if you have the means and the opportunity, get out there and try. If I can get out there and try it, anybody can get out there and try it. And I wrote something and I called it easy. And I want to read this. It says, I said, you have to commit, because without commitment, you'll never start. Without will and tenacity, you'll never finish. These things are hard for a reason. If it was easy, I wouldn't be here doing this. None of us would. It's supposed to be hard. Easy doesn't move us forward in the subject. It's the nature of the creature. Easy is what keeps us in the same place. Ease is a greater threat to our progress than hardship ever will be. So how do we push forward? With determination? Why? Because we can? No. Because we have the means? No. Because it's easy? No. We push forward and forge our path through this because it's hard. If it was easy, the path would have been worn in long ago by those that came before us. So it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. And we're doing everything we can. We have skin in this game, so that's what we're doing. We're putting our money where our mouth is. Whether people want to believe that's what's happening out there or not, it's all up to them. So there we are.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a very lovely hour, and we're going to be back here tomorrow, right? 7:00 p.m. Central.
Yeah.
With who?
D.A. Roberts.
D.A. Roberts and Neoma.
Neoma.
Yes.
Finn. Yeah.
Yeah. Will be a researcher's report tomorrow with D.A. Roberts. You guys can go check out his channel. It's D.A. Roberts. I'll see about putting a link in the description after this for their channel.
It was on last Sunday.
It's on last week's in the
No,
description. Okay.
he was on last Sunday, wasn't he?
Yeah, him
With
and
Lenita. Yeah.
well, it was my fault. I double booked and didn't realize it, so I just had them all on. But I just told since Miss Bryant had told a lot of her stories. What she experienced, that I would have DA and Neoma back and we'd have a discussion. So that's going to be tomorrow night, 7:00 p.m. Central. We hope to see you guys there. And if not, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.